What's the benefit of the 726?
Well, here, no, they go back down to 2016, but that's not one, it was only for everybody who's already existed.
But it's
Few
not
building it
retroactive,
wasn't.
right?
No, but that's what we're trying to balance your value on is what it would have been worth in 2016. I'm doing a presentation for her.
What's the benefit of that?
It's been funny.
Oh,
So that.
waiting all this time. Good evening. I'd like to call our meeting to order for March 24th. May I have a mover and a seconder?
Moved by Councillor McInnes, seconded by Councillor Corbett, that this meeting be opened at 7 p.m.
All in favor? Carried. Guess that didn't work. Could I have an adoption of the agenda?
Moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Featherstone, that the agenda presented to council and dated the 24th day of March 2026 be adopted as prepared.
All in favor? Carried. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest? None? Next, we have the adoption of the previous minutes. Over to seconder.
Moved by Councillor Corbett, seconded by Councillor Clark, that the minutes of the regular council meeting of March 10th, 2026 be adopted as circulated.
All in favor? Carried. Next, we have a guest tonight. It's Alice Newton from MPAC to give us a quarterly update. Welcome to our meeting this evening.
Yeah, Council, I'm happy to be here this evening. So today we are talking about more so an update on the work in 2025, and a recommitment to the role that we do, the role that we fit into the property assessment system, and some resources for you guys as well as ratepayers. So a little bit different than maybe what's in front of you, but there's going to be similarities. So thank you for the introduction. Yes, Alice Newton, working at MPAC, and the role that I do is primarily I work with municipalities and pretty much connect them with the assessors and the work that they do kind of as a go-between, and I support all the municipalities in the Nipissing and North Prairie Sound districts.
Sorry, can you hear?
Oh,
Not real.
No,
well,
that's,
no.
I was gonna say, can you, sorry, yeah, if you don't mind. You've got a very soft voice.
Oh, it's moving up.
Yeah,
Probably gonna have to.
Thanks.
yeah, no, it's just very soft, so
How is this? How is this? Or do you
Better.
want me to
Better,
try
yeah.
and project my voice more?
that would be great. Thank you. Thank you
Okay, no
so
problem.
much.
Okay. That's great. All right, so again, thank you for having me this evening, and I just want to start off with the review kind of who Municipal Property Assessment Corporation is. So we were formed by the,
Okay,
we were formed by the province in the late 90s, and the purpose of creating MPAC was to, sorry,
are you getting
Yeah.
feedback? Yeah.
I'm sure if you just work to really project your voice.
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
So
Sure.
is this still okay if I'm speaking here maybe a little bit away from the microphone, or I could even stand closer to you guys?
I would bring it closer. Yeah.
Yeah, come closer. Thank you.
Easier
Thanks
you
for,
guys.
yeah, accommodating.
Okay, this will
That's
be
better.
better. This will be better.
But we won't need that.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
don't worry about the money.
Does it matter for?
No, I don't think.
No,
Okay, so
and
you guys
yeah,
have, okay.
Yeah, and
All
we
right,
have
okay.
it here.
This works, so as long as you can see the
Yeah.
screen and everything, good. So yeah, we were formed by the province in the late 90s with the intent purpose of providing fair and equitable assessments for properties that form the basis of property taxes throughout Ontario. Today, we have grown to assess over 5.7 million properties in the province. And we still provide those accurate, fair assessments. So every municipality is a member of MPAC and contributes to our levy in addition to the revenue that we generate to offset the levy through licensing of products and other services that we provide. We are governed by a 15-member board, and that's comprised of representatives from the province, from taxpayers, as well as municipalities. And the property assessments that we create are the foundation for property taxes in the province and every municipality.
How are board members chosen?
That's a good question. They're chosen by, as far as I understand, the Ministry of Finance. So it's not something that's done through MPAC or anything. I believe, I guess, similar to how other board members are posted. I think they have like a
Is there a
website.
public announcement?
It's a
or-
public appointment
It
secretariat
is, okay.
through the PAS. Yeah.
So if there's like openings, I think they would post
Yeah.
it to that they have. But I'm sorry, it's out of, I don't really know. I
If you
guess
go,
I
if you go to
should-
the public appointment secretariat website, you can see it.
Okay. I should have done some homework, sorry.
No, don't worry about it. Okay, so I just want to point out as well, so for residents in Bonfield, your local MPAC assessment office that we work out of is in North Bay, Ontario. So we're located at 180 Sheriff Avenue. We're on the second floor. I just want to point that out because we actually were in the mall, if anyone's familiar with like where we were, for the longest time, but we did move at the end of, I think, 2024. So it's good to just know if anyone is listening and they are interested in coming in and speaking to someone about their property assessment. You do not need an appointment to come in between Monday and Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. That being said, it is helpful if you have a complex property assessment question. That way the correct assessor can be available to kind of answer that question. For people who would like to come in and speak to someone, we do ask that they bring in their 19-digit roll number that's associated with their property, and that's located on the property assessment notice. And those are typically sent out annually at the end of November. However, not every owner receives a notice every single year. It's more so during a reassessment or whenever there's a change on the property. And usually it's when there's a change that someone might have a question. But that being said, if people don't have their property assessment notice, they can still contact MPAC and get connected with that information. But it is helpful to have that when they're coming in to talk to somebody. Next slide. Oh. You're ahead of the game. You're ahead of the game. So again, MPAC's very visible. Everybody knows that we create the assessments in the province and that feeds into property taxes. But there are 4 key players in the property assessment system. So first and foremost, the Ontario government, the Ministry of Finance, they are the governing body that is setting the assessment legislation that we follow when we're creating property taxes. And they're also responsible for overseeing the creation and administration of the Assessment Review Board. And that is where appeals for assessments, if they're not resolved through a request for reconsideration, would go. Next, MPAC, as you know, we were created in order to provide equitable and fair assessments in the province. And that's the work that we continue to do today. Next, municipalities. I don't think I have to tell you what the responsibilities are, but obviously I'm sure you guys just went through the process. We're going through it. You look at the services that are required for municipalities, you vote on setting the budget, you determine what the requirements are, and obviously it is based on partially what is the assessment in the municipality. And then of course, property owners responsible for footing the bill, but also responsible for interacting in the market in an open way. And that information does feed back into how we assess property. So also, I just want to point out that as there has been a pause on a reassessment, and that's while the province undertakes a review, which started in 2022. So until there's been an announcement from the province, all of the properties in Ontario are valued as of January 1st, 2016. So one of the things that we do outside of an assessment year, or many of the things that we do, is we're constantly updating property data. So that involves looking at sales, keeping our market data up to date, responding to requests for reconsideration. Some of the key details that I want to point out, I don't know if it's in the information that you have, is province-wide MPAC created assessments for 81,000 new residential homes in the province. You know, we responded to over 12,000 requests for reconsideration. So that's answering questions that property owners have about their properties and hopefully resolving those issues. In addition, we mailed out over 600,000 property assessment notices and created, you know, over 300,000 property inspections. So all this to say, there is work that continues to be done outside of a reassessment. We do more work during that period, but there's other legislated roles that we fill, such as responding to the request for reconsideration, responding to tax applications, and also representing at Assessment Review Board appeals. Okay. Next slide. I do have this information if you want to look at that later as well. So I think, you know, it's great to hear about what's happening in the province, but also we're in Bonfield. We should talk about Bonfield. So looking at 2025, obviously you saw all the work that we did collectively across the province, but just in Bonfield alone, the number of properties that we assessed in 2025 was 1,684. And we generated more than $7 million in new assessments. And the total assessment value in the municipality is now over $300 million. So one thing I want to highlight is this work that we do also ties back into the work that staff do. So that new assessment is generally generated from building permit information that we receive monthly from the municipality, which helps us be able to capture assessments. You look like you have a question.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that in 2025, 1,684 properties were assessed in Bonfield.
That's the number of properties that we have assessments for.
Sorry?
They have an assessment, they weren't assessed.
Oh, that you have assessments for, right?
Yeah, so it goes up a little every year. So essentially, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, although maybe.
So that's the
I
total
might.
amount of properties in Bonfield.
That's the total amount that we assess. Yeah, so it's different than obviously like the population counts, but it's for the number of roles that we have created. So not every one of these properties is going to be like a home. Some of them are going to be vacant or farmland or different types of properties, but that's generally kind of like the number of assessment roles we have.
Okay, and then the 7.2 million in new assessments.
In new assessments generated through people building new homes.
Right, so
adding
how
garages.
many homes out of the 1,684 would that account for? Do you have that number?
In terms of?
To make up the 7.2 million.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Well, we added, so essentially when we add a new house or a new garage, those are considered in-year changes. So they're actioned through something called a supplementary or omitted assessment. Supplementary means something that happened in the past year. Omitted means it was previously omitted from the tax roll. So those are the two mechanisms. I know that in Bonfield we had over, I want to say 25, so between 19 and 28. And the reason I have kind of a range for that is because when it comes to an omitted assessment, that's for every year that it was omitted. So I don't have, I guess, the difference between those numbers. I can definitely get you that information.
I think people are going to be very interested in this because, again, we haven't had an assessment since 2016,
Right.
like you say. And so, so you are assessing people as the permits are given or new builds or what have you, so that people are paying much higher if they have been assessed over the past 10 years. That who haven't been assessed since 2016. Would that be a fair statement?
I love that you're asking this because no, that is not the case.
Okay.
So essentially, we received over 60 building permits in 2025, and we processed or closed over 70, included that assessment in coming up with this value. But the way that the provincial system works in terms of assuring equity and fairness, it ties back to what we call, and I'll probably get into it a bit later, but I might as well bring it up now, the common valuation date. So that January 1st, 2016 value, when we add a new property to that assessment, what we're doing is we're creating a hypothetical value, and it gets a little bit tricky as we're in 2026 because the assessment date is 2016. But that's why, and maybe go to the next slide, I think it will maybe highlight this. So I just want you to look at the last bullet point here, that the median assessment of a single family home in 2025 was $195,000 assessed dollars, I'll say. And then the new assessments average were 279,000. So at first glance, it seems like, well, new assessments being assessed higher. But when we look at these values, obviously, no one's buying a single family home, at least not at a median level, for $195,000. And no one's buying a new home that was just constructed for $279,000. So both of these values are derived from that January 1st, 2016. The difference between these numbers is that for that $195,000 assessment, that property is older, that property is smaller. That's what's feeding into why those assessed values are lower. And then the newer builds are much larger. They have a different quality of construction. They have more modern amenities, and that does play into the difference. But both of the values are in the lens of January 1st, 2016, even though it seems like the new ones are higher.
Your worship, I can tell you the feedback on the ground, like from our level, is anybody with a new home, anybody who's been assessed during this freeze, is paying disproportionately high taxes compared to what they feel their neighbor is paying. So, and I get it, 3,000 square foot home built in 1980 versus a 3,000 square foot home built in 2024, different assessed values. But when you translate that into to real property taxes, they are paying. I mean, I can point out some people in the room. I can point out friends that have that are absolutely paying disproportionately high taxes compared to their house value, and my house value. And should not be the same.
I love that you're engaged in what the other owners are assessed at. That tells me that you've been on about my property. It tells me that you've used the mapping tool, that you've looked at what these other values are, that you're seeing these inconsistencies. And what I would suggest for yourself or anyone else who has these feelings, especially if they've been newly assessed within the last 5 years, every single year a property owner has what we call the right to receive a property assessment notice. So even though I said we don't send them every year, every single year a property owner can come to MPAC, file a request for reconsideration. It is free. It is something you can do online. What we want owners to ask themselves is, could my property have sold for this amount of money in 2016? Well, probably yes. Now, the second question, is all the information that we have on the property correct? Maybe it isn't. You know, that's something that we can definitely address through a request for reconsideration. And then finally, kind of to your point, is what are the other properties assessed as, and does this seem equitable? And you come to MPAC, file the request for reconsideration, you have this list of properties that says, well, they're all the same square footage. Maybe there's a little bit of difference in time, you know, maybe my assessment isn't equitable, and there's still those mechanisms to do those adjustments through the request for reconsideration process on an annual basis. It's good that I'm here today because for 2026, that deadline is March 31st for the 2026 tax year. So I guess what I'm saying is now is the time to file the request for reconsideration to get that review started. You know, I can't address the specific kind of inequities that you're speaking to. All I can kind of say is from the information that we have, looking at those median values, there are clear differences between the higher value, the higher assessed value, and the lower assessed value. And there's another slide that does go into detail on it, and I will circle back on that point, actually.
I guess you don't have the KPI on how many people call and have their taxes actually lowered.
You know what, we do have that information. I think it's actually in the other slide.
Because I'd be scared to call.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, I mean, there's no like negative impacts, I
Is
would
there
say.
not?
Well,
You
good question.
can't charge more?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Here's the situation. When it comes to a request for reconsideration, asking yourself those few questions, one thing to point out in terms of I don't want to have a bigger assessment is if you review your property assessment record and you can see that there's inconsistencies in terms of the effective age of your property, the age that it was built, not captured, maybe your basement's fully renovated or some of those things. Because we do that review at the time of the request for reconsideration, I would say that if we have an incorrect assessment and it's related to something that would make the assessment go up, then yes, that could be the outcome because there's 3 outcomes. It could be no change, that's the most common. It could be assessment goes up, or it could be assessment goes down. But I think in the situation that you're talking about, when there's an equity issue, we look at that information, we can make adjustments. And I'm sure, staff here who process we call them minutes of settlement, can attest that, there are reductions that do happen. Overall, I think it was in the other slide of the quarterly report, but it kind of showed, overall in the province, I can't remember what the number was, but say 4% of people file a request for reconsideration. And, what did that number look like in Bonfield? It's definitely less than 2%. It's not something that the residents are showing, and maybe it's because they don't feel comfortable. They feel like their assessment could go up. Start the trend. Ask the question. Like I said, we try to make ourselves available, and you don't need to file a request for reconsideration to start the conversation with staff about something that has changed, but just being aware of what resources are available to kind of like help inform if you think that it's not equitable. So like I said, About My Property is a really great tool. You got your 19 roll number, you register, you can look at the assessed value. I mean, you're living in the neighborhood, you kind of know what your neighbor's house is. Obviously, it doesn't give you any personal information or anything like that, but if you are familiar with those properties, you can kind of see, I think it's like square footage. I can't recall all the information that's on there, but it's enough to help inform kind of, does it seem like there's something off for my property compared to my neighbor or something like that?
So trying to make it make sense to the average person. I built in 2016. We have somebody here that purchased a house 2 years ago, and our houses are pretty close in size, but their taxes are a lot more than mine.
Here's what I was gonna say.
That's where we're trying to get to.
Yes.
Like, I just don't see how, I don't see where it makes sense. Like I said, I built 2016, moved in 2017, and we have somebody bought a new house 2 years ago, and their taxes are way higher than mine.
So now sorry, Jason. We're waiting for the other shoe to drop because when is yours going to be that high,
Right,
right?
so-
So when is your?
So I think the point I get, it's well above our pay grade and yours, no disrespect,
Yes,
but
yes.
ultimately, we'll call a spade a spade. In 2016, they froze an imperfect system, and the longer that it stays frozen, the bigger the discrepancy gets. So if you're going to bring back a message, lift the freeze, allow municipalities to adjust their mill rate to an increased assessment rate so that we are still collecting the same amount of dollars that we need, but because it was an imperfect system, in 2016, the assessed value of my house versus what I could sell it for were 2 very different numbers. So that's the problem that we're feeling now, is they're going back and looking not what my house was assessed at in 2016, it must be more based on what could my house sell for, because I can't figure out the discrepancy or why it would be such a large range between that situation and somebody in the newer. And I get, I'm sorry, you're sitting here in front of Impact, but no, I'm representing Impact, and this has nothing to do with you, and I get it, but.
It's interesting because I actually used to be a property inspector, when I first started at Impact. So I was going to people's houses and assessing their properties and talking to people when they would open the door. So I totally understand. I totally understand, your perspective. I do want to fast forward. And I
Fair
see what
enough.
you're
We'll
saying.
stop. Yeah.
No, I think it kind of speaks to that point, but if you want to go forward to the next one. So I know what we're saying in terms of, it doesn't feel, like something feels off.
Mhm.
And I'm not invalidating that information, but I do just want to say, generally speaking, these are the factors, these are the reasons why there's differences in those assessments. Now, you'd really have to look at the individual assessments, which does happen during request for reconsideration, to kind of unpack some of that information, but certainly the reason I wanted to bring up the square footage of those difference in assessed values is that it's such a determinant when it comes to what we call, like I say, exterior square footage. That's huge. Obviously the lot size I would say is not probably as relevant because certainly in Bonfield, there's going to be a lot of huge properties. So really it's the house probably that's driving a lot of that value. Again, the age, and the age isn't necessarily the age of when we created the assessment, but it's just the change in like taste and how those relate to like the market value of the style of the home and all of those things, and the location as well as the construction quality. So I hear what you're saying. I don't want to say it means that you're underassessed, and
I might be.
Yeah.
Like,
but look at the property data and ask
Yeah,
yourself those questions.
the freeze is becoming more and more frustrating from the
Of
seat
course.
I sit in now.
Mhm.
And again, I get it's the province that it's frozen and I get it's like not you. But
Thank you for saying that.
yes, of course. So, but the fact that we allow this perceived inequity, we can even call it at that point. But I'm telling you, from the boots on the ground, which we are the closest, I would argue we're closer to the taxpayer than MPAC is.
Mhm.
We are absolutely hearing it
Yes.
all over the place about that inequity. So if nothing more, if you're saying, or if MPAC is saying it's not an inequity, great, stop the freeze, let everybody just settle out, and then municipalities will do what they do with the mill rate. So
Well, it's giving me some ideas actually in terms of, I wasn't working in this role in 2023. I know somebody from MPAC came out after the election to kind of do, this is MPAC, this is what we do. And of course, things have changed. We're coming into another election. You guys are seasoned in your roles, but the information that could be helpful to both yourself and taxpayers does seem like it's changing. So Nikki, if you want to go back to kind of where we were.
maybe the next quarterly report.
Well, that's actually for internalized on,
Oh, okay.
but they'll give you updates.
Excellent.
So one thing I wanted to do today, I guess,
Oh, also, sorry, it's not retroactive either, right?
what do you mean?
So if I'm assessed today, I'm going to pay from now forward. So regardless of if because there hasn't been an assessment in 10 years, it's not retroactive to 10 years.
Well,
Yeah.
it could go up to 2 years in terms of, so if you build something and you start using it, MPAC can backdate an assessment, we call it the effective date, up to the current year plus an additional 2 years, and that's that omitted assessment and why there may be multiple years of taxes that are owed. Obviously, that's not a situation that MPAC or municipal staff want to be in. It's important that we try and assess things. We have an 85% target within 1 year of occupancy. Now, there's reasons why that does or does not happen, but being able to do that is helpful because it means that no one's getting a tax bill for 2 years, which I'm sure is extremely painful. So like I say, we try to prevent it, but there are situations where it does happen, and we do have the legislative authority to create an effective date that goes back in time. And then that just means that people end up paying all of the taxes, or maybe they have a payment plan, I'm not sure, but that's not the goal, I would say. So, I know we got off track a little.
Sorry.
Sorry about that.
Yes, sorry,
Yeah.
sorry.
It's a very interactive
No, I
presentation.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I think it is
That is
more fun. And it's great that, the slides I think are generating a conversation. Like I said, one thing I wanted to do coming back today is not just come back and talk about the work that MPAC does, but I did want to bring in some of the assessment changes that we have seen, but what your comments are telling me is like, there's space to go further into like unpacking some of those questions around equity and like what does that look like, obviously in an anonymized perspective. I know we did a presentation at a different municipality that was more focused on that because there was a lot of questions and they were looking at a really high tax increase. So it was just something to help kind of get everyone on the same page in terms of what we see, what you see, and what taxpayers feel. So lots to think about. And then just something I want to highlight, although we already know because we're hearing all the comments, is that, 85% of our tax base here, at least, is residential property owners. And the growth that we see, there has been the same growth year over year, which is good, which is what we want to see. It means people are still building homes in Bonfield and we're still seeing that growth, but it is in the residential class and it is driven by people building new homes, building garages, renovating their basements, having an in-law suite. Those are changes that do result in potentially a higher tax bill. We call it an increase in assessment, but that's what it is. And again, coming back to the taxation system, it's based on your property taxes are related to the assessed value of your home. So making improvements does respond to higher property taxes, and that is the way that the system is set up. And one thing, oh, here we go. There was 15 new, we call them 301s. It's a property code for a single family home that I see on my notes. So to answer your back question. And then generally speaking, in terms of growth and what's a little bit above median and, where is that coming from? I think a key important factor is between 2015 and 2020, the average growth within this property class was, maybe 4% for that single family home. And then between 2020 and 2025, it's 7%. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but, small adjustments in this do lead to, millions of dollars in assessment. So having your tax base growing is a great position to be in. And I think that it's great to see these numbers for Bonfield. Next slide. And also something that was noted when I was looking at the assessment that we capture between 2020 and 2025 is, historically, Bonfield has existing hamlets, obviously Bonfield and Rutherglen, and the development that we're seeing, that we're capturing the new homes and things like that are kind of centralized around year-round properties in and around Lake Nasponsing, and then also these pockets of development kind of in these historic rural areas. So that's interesting. Also, between 2015 and 2020, we didn't see any growth in properties that we class as duplexes. Between 2020 and 2026, we saw a doubling of those properties. So that's a pretty significant change. It pales in comparison to the number of single family homes, but these are some of the things that, are in the data that we collect, which can relate back to outside of property taxes, also just information that we do make available to municipalities that kind of help them understand. I think it's interesting going into an election year because obviously planning can move slowly, buildings can take a while, especially with costs going up. But looking back at being elected to council in 2022, making decisions, and then now in 2025, things that you guys decided on are now what you see in assessments, and kind of linking that back together. I think that is pretty interesting. And the next slide. Oh, I also want to say that for 2026, to touch on what we expect to see, as I said, 2025 was above median, which sounds boring. And we expect to see growth, but maybe not as much in 2026. We do put out a forecast that we make available to staff a few times a year, and it's based on the number of building permits that we have in our files that we're aware of, how things are progressing in terms of getting finals and updates, and what we would expect to see at that time of the year. So again, in 2026, primarily residential properties, and then we're forecasting between 19 and 23 new homes with, again, that same assessed value. That's just what we base it on, and that 279 is based on the median or average value from 2019 to 2026 and how much those assessments were. So in terms of the current value assessment, we did kind of already talk about it and kind of jump back and forth. So I don't want to go back over too much because I feel like we already said our piece on how we feel about if a property was assessed for $225,000 in 2026. This is in my notes. This means that that's what it was sold for in 2016. So there's dissenting opinions. That's okay. But the system as a whole, there's always going to be outliers, is based on everyone paying their fair share based on that equitable assessment. And of course, that valuation date that is set by the province that's legislated is January 1st, 2016. It continues to be that way until we hear an update, but they're back in session, new year. I don't know what's gonna happen.
They're expanding Billy Bishop.
Yeah, I did see that. It is an election year, so that would be a crazy wrench.
Yeah, we'll see.
So yeah, looking back, I mean, we did jump back and forth, but I just wanna, it wouldn't be an impact presentation if we didn't talk about how we approach different types of properties. So there's 3 main approaches that are used: direct comparison, income and cost. And then the next slide. For the
Can I ask you a question? After COVID, the market for housing exceeded all the fair market values and the appraisals, and sometimes we looked at the appraised value and then the inflated value would be 3 times difference, say 200,000. The people would end up buying it for 600,000. Does that determine the information that would, the information that's there into the register system, would that make a difference on the assessment?
What I'll say, so even though we're always reviewing sales data, and that's part of the way that because we're on a mass valuation approach, and the values that we create are derived from sales in part, the people who create those values are like statisticians, and we adhere to international standards of like how we qualify how data is, and we're constantly checking it against like current sales data. So when there is a reassessment date called, it's going to be relevant to whatever that date is. So it's going to be in a future date, and obviously the market has cooled down by then. So any of those sales that are no longer relevant are not going to be included in the model that's being used to create those valuations. And then the current market value, because we're using the common valuation date, shouldn't factor into what those assessed values are, even if something sold for like an amount that nobody who already lived in Bonfield would be willing to pay. I moved to Sudbury in 2021 from Southern Ontario, and I thought I got a great deal on my house. And of course, I have a job at MPEC, and I show up, and everyone knows how much money I paid for my house, and they are embarrassed for me, and I had no idea. So,
It's because of everybody.
so it kind of plays into what is the market value. It's what the market can bear. And obviously we saw a lot of changes in Bonfield. So the people coming into the market who are paying those prices are maybe not the people who were living and just upgrading their home. And to them, it was a fair price at the time, but obviously I think things have stabilized. And once we see what that new reassessment date is, you know, I've only worked at MPAC, not in a reassessment year, so that will be interesting. But one thing I understand that we do is put out information that kind of is like comparing what it was, what it is, all of that information. And then also I would say that as members of council, as the mayor, as property owners in Bonfield, if you have access to About My Property, there is a dashboard there called Property Pulse, and it allows you to see kind of market information about properties, which as we know, is not the same as assessed value, but it is interesting to kind of see what happened in 2025. You know, does it seem like the values are changing in terms of what people are buying properties for, what the single family home is selling for? And it can be useful, I think, just to kind of help put some background information into where we think things are going, because again, we're talking about these 2016 values, and 179 and 279, they don't really seem like what people are paying for properties. So hopefully that answers your question.
And what was that?
Oh, I said, does that answer your question? We'll see.
Say it again.
Yeah. Well, there's room for more later. So for the direct comparison approach, this is the most common approach to value that's utilized in Bondfield because it's related to residential properties, it's related to vacant land, and it's based on what you're saying, all of those assessed values. But like I said, assessed values, market information, sales transactions, fair and open market transactions, but it's going to be based on what the valuation date is. So like I said, I don't think that a valuation date of 2027, 2028 would be including sales that happened in 2022 at the peak of the market. Those would not be used to determine the assessed value. It would be looking at the current market data. But what we do use the sales for in all of the years is just to kind of qualify what value, what attributes, those 5 factors are driving market interest. You know, I think that looking at the municipality, maybe not being so familiar with it, but from the trends that we've seen, waterfront properties are going to continue to be extremely valuable and popular for people. It's going to be the type of property that will still continue to have a higher assessed value because that's what the market bears and that's what people are interested in, willing to pay more for. So it's kind of relating to that.
When the property owners change, the information comes through the registry system to the impact. And that's why I wondered how much information you would have at that time if you would, for the sale of the value of the property.
So we do,
when it was sold.
When information comes in, although we don't make our model valuation public, you know, outside of a reassessment, outside of those values, it's part of the review that MPAC does, and it's continually looking to see that is this value that it's selling for, even in a current market rate, in line with where we think the value would be. And if it's not, it flags it to our assessors so that they can undertake a review. And again, it's not meant to penalize people who are buying properties. It's meant to feed back into that equitable system. So unfortunately, sometimes creating equity feels not equal for everybody involved, where some people, their assessed values may be changing in a way that they didn't want to see. But again, we do the property sales reviews in order to qualify the sales data that we're using to make sure that it's reflective of what the property's features actually are, if that makes sense.
And that's what I wanted to hear, because otherwise I don't think it would be fair to the neighbors around. And if it was based on, some people will pay $100,000 more for a home because they want it. Mm-hmm. And at that time, and the difference, difference in the property values. And I just wondered how much information comes from the system to MPAC and how that determines it. So it seems that it's fair if it's based on what the values are and looking at the property. It seems more fair than just taking the value of the property, mm-hmm. How it was
yeah, we try to qualify it, but I will say that I'm sure there are situations where we could make a mistake. It's not a perfect system. It's just the system that we have. So that's why it's nice to be aware of the tools that property owners have, that municipalities have, to say, I don't agree with this assessment. And there are rights for property owners. Municipalities as well can challenge assessments and ask questions. And that also helps create that fair system, having people challenge those values, and allows us to kind of speak to what we're putting out there as fair and equitable. So it's not, there is work involved in doing it, but I think it's worth it if, you know, you're looking at your assessment and you have those questions, because it's true, especially, you know, in 2026. When was the last time, you know, the property was fully reviewed? Maybe the information is not correct. And if you are looking at it and it doesn't seem that it is, I say file the request. But I would say that. And if I can find out how many go up, you want to know that, you want to know. I don't think it's very high. I think most of it's no change.
Proportional, yeah.
It's probably mostly no change, especially this far outside of a reassessment, because, you know, the values have been around for so long. Some of those inequities that may have been created when there was a reassessment kind of get addressed within that first year, because when there's shifts in that amount, you will see kind of bigger differences, because we're not revaluing every single property. We're keeping the values, we're making changes where there's new assessment and new information that's available about properties. And that's what's being changed, not like a full review of where taste or preferences are shifting. That's not something that we can do outside of a reassessment.
How often do you have this interactive of a presentation?
How often?
How often do you have this interactive of a presentation?
No. No.
Does everyone else normally just sit here and nod? Yeah.
People who are on their phones. But again, I think it's good to have the kind of dialogue. You know, I will caveat by saying I don't have the perfect answer for every single question, but as long as we can like learn something, I feel like I learned something.
Do you do community information sessions?
We don't typically do community information sessions, which isn't to say that we wouldn't. It's just something that I guess outside of a reassessment, it's not something that they've thought would be beneficial. But I think that but I'm hearing that maybe it would be.
I wouldn't put myself in that position either if I were you, so probably not the best idea.
Well, like me myself.
I don't mean
running
just
the
you,
show,
but yeah.
You know, I work with a team of qualified assessors out of the North Bay office. They have lots of experience, and obviously anyone who's been a property assessor who's gone and had those conversations, who responds to the request for reconsiderations, they can answer those questions, because those are the only questions that people have. That's pretty much that's just how it is. Just kind of like, you know, municipal staff and council and the types of things that we hear. Property taxes does come into the conversation, I will say, but of course we try to steer it and we say, hey, we're just talking about assessments, but we're all kind of in the same boat, I think, when it comes to how people feel about assessments. And so we did talk about this, I think, and then the request for reconsideration, so I don't need to go into that one in more detail. I will say for the income approach, in terms of how it's applied in Bondfield, there will be less properties, but where it differs from the direct comparison, we're still looking at market data, we're still looking at property sales, but then we're also qualifying the information based on the amount of rent that's collected, and then that gets factored into the capitalization rate, which is used to determine the assessed value. So it's just a different way of approaching how to value these properties. And then for the next one, the cost approach is related to more specialized farm buildings, industrial properties, large properties that are rarely on the market. Now, this does say gravel pits. Of course, as we know, there has been some changes, or maybe we don't know, but there has been some changes provincially in terms of how assessment legislation has changed. So generally speaking, we're valuing these elements based on cost. So there's still a land value component, and then there's all of the accessible equipment and buildings that get factored in. And then there's things like depreciation, and it does get more complex, but specifically for gravel pits, there's also legislation that was introduced that helps inform how MPAC does create property assessments. And that's another important thing. So even though we are out there doing our assessment thing, every single decision that we make is based on how we're authorized to evaluate things during the act, or through the Assessment Act and its associated regulations. So when it comes to certain types of properties or certain, I'm trying to think of a property that would be an example, like pipelines is based on like a linear foot that's like legislated in the Assessment Act. There's certain things that it's not up for interpretation. It's very specifically laid out how we would assess it, and gravel pits has become one of those things within the last couple of years.
On the cost approach, does MPAC have a position on, and I'm not trying to stir a bee's nest, but on short-term rentals? So with properties that are primarily used as short-term rental versus residential with short-term, like, because I see that you have hospitality properties in here. Do you see a future in where that's going, or an MPAC position?
That is definitely more of a assessment legislation question, I would say. For us, and maybe I can get some information to share, after the presentation in terms of what we're seeing in short-term rentals and how it relates back to properties. I believe for the most part, they would just be valued as residential properties.
They are currently, yes, absolutely. I'm just wondering if MPAC had a position, and maybe, yeah.
Oh, I don't.
I get that it's
but
likely legislative change.
I'll definitely find out because it's something that is kind of like been a hot topic, I would say, for the last few years, and especially after the reassessment. So some of these questions I would hope would be answered through assessment legislation updates. And I would say that it's storage properties or properties like self-storage, solar farms, battery storage areas, like kinds of properties, different types of communication equipment that weren't necessarily as relevant in 2016 that have kind of come up. And that does bring back to why it is important to have a reassessment, why there is value, why it does help in maintaining that equitable system to account for speaking to cost properties. The way that we value properties, there's new equipment, there's new ways of buildings that are coming online that aren't necessarily factored into what that 2016 value is. And all we can do is approximate or make a hypothetical call on valuing them until we get more information through a reassessment. And then looping back to, it seems like we've already been talking about taxes a bit. For the next slide, it is up to municipal council in coordination with staff to determine the amount of taxes that are required in order to provide the services that you feel need to be put out by the municipality. But I guess, if we looked at the breakdown of the budget, I can just guess that, most of the money isn't related to the decisions necessarily that you guys make. A lot of the funds are out of your control in terms of the amount of money that does have to be spent on
Levies.
Yes, everything else, including the MPAC levy, including services that, you provide through different boards. So all that to say, there is other factors at play, but essentially you have to approve the budget, and that budget does feed back into our assessed values, and it's that rate that ends up being what property taxes are paid by residents. And we like to say that we don't determine the taxes paid, we just assist in the distribution because it is based on the assessment, and that is a very convenient thing to be able to say, I guess, especially after a budget.
Especially when it's been frozen and municipalities are feeling the crunch to keep our tax increases to a level that people are accustomed to. So, 3%, 4%, except we're not getting the benefit, or there is no other offsetting of an increased assessed value of an individual property. I get there might be new
The
properties.
way I look at it
But-
as a property owner is percentage, assessed value, what am I actually paying? And that does increase either way. And something that is part of the conversation, but I come to these discussions and it's me talking about the work that MPAC does and yourself talking about the work that you guys do and how they play into each other. And then there's obviously another seat, or two other seats at the table. So there's only so much that we can do, but essentially we're all kind of working within the confines of the roles that we have. And
Excuse me.
I appreciate
costs
that.
are going up. My taxes go up every year. It's convenient to say that it's, the city, but we know that it would either be based on the assessed values. It's the actual cost of things are more, and that's why we're paying more.
Yeah, and it's a perception thing, because whether there's $10 extra coming out of my pocket and part of it was an increased assessment on my my house value, and part of it is a smaller percentage, it's still $10. So from
Yeah,
from a
that's-
taxpayer, it's
That's
$10,
how I
it's $10.
feel. I'm always like,
I
okay,
agree,
5%. but,
Except
like,
I'm
how
gonna
much is
speak
this
as a
actually?
politician for a second right now.
Yeah.
That's setting us up to fail.
Yeah.
So, you know, it looks great and it's easy not easy, I'm not trying to downplay, but MPAC gets to say, well, hey, you set the mill rate. Sure, except if we have to start talking about a 7% tax increase, people's eyes go this big, when really that would have been typically a 3% tax increase, publicly talking about 3% plus their assessed value. So it's the same money coming out, but that's not how the public perceives it, because not everybody knows the level that you're educated on this for sure, so
Well,
that's
that's
the
why we come
perception.
out, and that's why we do try and put a lot of information out for owners. You know, it's what you want to know. So there is a video, if we have time to look at it, otherwise we can watch it on our own time. But it's just an example of the type of stuff that MPEC does do to promote kind of these concepts of what's going to change, what's my assessed value, how is it related to property taxes. Again, it doesn't address kind of what you're speaking to, but again, that is outside of all of our control in terms of some of the challenges that we've all been faced with within the last 5 years.
Will this be on the website?
That was my
Yeah,
question.
that's,
Yeah,
this is like
yeah,
a
I can put
public,
this on the website.
Yeah.
this is
so
a
that's
public
good.
video.
So
And
that we
then-
can direct constituents.
Yeah,
I
think it'd be-
And it is on the impact,
Yes,
yes.
but not everyone's going to our website to learn about assessment stuff. I would say that it is very common, and thank you for putting information about MPEC on your website to kind of tie back into, because, you know, it's often what happens is, and I'm not saying this is what happens, but we do send out property assessment notices, we do send out property assessment change notices to property owners, and maybe they're just not aware of what that information is because it's not tied to a tax bill or something like that. But then they may receive a supplementary tax bill, and then all of a sudden, wait a minute,
Yeah.
I have questions about my assessment, which is totally fair. So it's great to have that information available because ultimately staff aren't able to speak to why. I mean, yes, a tax bill was issued
Was
because
this a
we.
10-minute presentation?
Poor you. Okay, good.
But, you know, I think again, this
Poor
is
one,
really
Celeste,
good, and it's, for me, no offense to any other council that I come to, I think it is more fun to have a conversation that does feel real and honest about where we're at with assessments and where there are challenges. There is still more work that can be done. I can only speak as somebody who owns a property, somebody who once didn't work at MPAC, and how I feel about reviewing the property assessments. I feel more confident now, probably because I do work here, in terms of, okay, this is what I would do if I got the notice, this is how I would, you know, go through it. But I think ultimately, just speaking from someone who does work at MPAC and my experiences with the staff, I think it's fair that if you have questions, if you're reading the assessment or the notice and you don't really, okay, well, what is this telling me? Have a conversation with the assessor. They can translate, you know, the numbers on the page, which sometimes I don't have an example of what it looks like, but if you have received one, you kind of have like 2012, like how is that relevant? 2016, the phase-in information, you know, we haven't had phase-in since like 2020, as well as, you know, certain types of information in your property, but the assessors can kind of translate that into, this is what we saw, this is what this represents. So I would kind of flag that as an opportunity to learn more about the property. As I said, we do make information available for property owners, and we do run different campaigns, but there is a lot of information out there, so it's not always getting into the hands that it probably needs. And then one thing that I would be, if I didn't have time to speak about this, is, you know, in how we support, I guess it's the next slide.
Yeah.
Not just municipal staff, but how, again, we let people know what we're up to, aside from coming in and talking about it in person. We do put out reports every single year that are our annual reports and our general reports, and they speak to all of the work that MPEC does, what we do with the money that you send us, how we're meeting our objectives, how we're valuing our work, what we're trying to achieve. And I think it helps get a better sense of what we want to do as an organization. And also, I think it helps to to kind of challenge what we're trying to do and throw a wrench in that and come up with your own ideas. Because again, kind of linking back to the beginning of the presentation, we were created by the province to create this equitable system, and we're paid for by municipalities. Yes, there's an offset in our levy from the services that we're able to provide to private industries, but the bulk of the money that pays for the work that we do is from the levies that are paid by all of those 444 municipalities. So I personally feel that we owe them what we can to kind of work together on some of these issues and challenges that we both face. We understand that it's complex, especially now that we're still talking about the common valuation date, but that is the system that we're in. So trying to bridge the gaps in the ways that we can. One way was introducing that Property Pulse dashboard within the About My Property to kind of give people an idea of what the market values are, you know, to look forward into a reassessment. This is what we might see. And I think if a reassessment is called, you'll see a lot more of us. You'll hear more from us. And that's, I think, basically everything. I know I said that we could ask questions, but I actually feel like we cannot anymore.
We're done, we're done.
Yeah. That was really good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are you driving back to Sudbury tonight?
I am driving.
Hopefully the roads are okay.
You know what, though? I think it's gonna be worse tomorrow.
Fair enough.
So the sun just went down.
Yeah.
If we were driving 2 months ago, it would have
Right.
been 4:30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been driving in the dark. My eyes are used to it now. If it's the summer
true.
and going into fall, that's like the worst, because then you're like, oh my gosh, have I always been able to drive in the dark? But yes, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. And
Thank you very much for your presentation. And I have one more question
Oh, you're not away yet?
before you leave. When do the assessors physically come out and go to the homes to
Yes.
reassess?
Yes, we do physically go out to the homes. So one thing that we started doing probably in 2021 is when we're doing an inspection of a, usually send a letter to the property owner to let them know we have information about your property. We want to come out and we're going to be out within this window. And then if they come to your property, obviously people are at work or whatever, we'll leave what we call a door hanger. Actually,
That's what you used to do?
well, we updated our branding, so they look a little bit different, but generally we go, if someone's not home, we'll leave this kind of saying, why were we at the property? What is the information we need? So we do inspect, I mean, I think it was on the slide, you know, in 2025, 300,000 inspections. That's not all boots on the ground. Some inspections can be done digitally, and we do, but I would say generally speaking, a new house, we're boots on the ground, we're in Bondfield. I'm not sure if you guys have seen us in the community or driving around, but essentially that's the system that we've created.
So you let it be known that you're in the area?
Yes, by sending the letter. Unfortunately, we're not so advanced that we can be like, this is the exact date or set an appointment with us, but it will say something like, within the next 8 weeks, somebody from MPAC will be visiting your property. And that's the timeline that we try to adhere to kind of alert them that there could be someone visiting the property in order to look at the assessment and see if there's going to be any changes.
Thank you.
All right.
Good enough.
Okay.
Night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night. Where are we next?
That poor woman go, lots of pent
We'll
up
just
energy
wait
from this
for
council,
Alex.
right? Or from me at least.
The last time they came to our property and that was living with me, she thought somebody was breaking in because they were going around the house.
Oh, no.
And she called the police, and then she called me at work. So I called him back and I said, are they out in Bonneville? Because I didn't know. They were just impact.
Snoop around.
Okay, next we have the staff reports. Report from the Planning administrator? He's not here. Who's doing it?
I can speak to it on the report. I think, it's in response to a conversation that took place at the council meeting March 10th. Pertaining to the planning advisory committee. The PAC is designated advisory committee of council, which combines members of council and appointed members of the public. There was a resignation that will be received later this evening from a member of the PAC committee. But given that it is an election year, if we went out to get a committee of adjustment member, a PAC member appointed and then brought up to speed and put on the committee, it might be at election time anyway, where we have to we reappoint all the committees. So there was a conversation at the meeting on whether or not we could just merge the PAC committee as well and the committee of adjustment, with the two members from the public joining to the committee of adjustment, and then just transferring some of those responsibilities from the PAC committee to the committee of adjustment. So the planning administrator has broken down a number of the provisions, how that is permitted in the Planning Act, how other municipalities have done it, how some of them are currently doing it. And then municipal practices on that. So it's really just up for a council consideration on whether you would like to merge those two committees for the remaining term of council. And then, so the next steps would be that you would, I think the PAC meeting is April 5th. I may be wrong on that, but it's that first Tuesday where there'll be a meeting, had the discussion as well with the members that are on there. I think there has been some preliminary conversation already. Get PAC to approve as well, and then come back to the next council meeting if you do want to merge them together and pass the necessary bylaws and everything else. So tonight it's just open for discussion.
I can open the conversation if you like.
Sure.
Given the short amount of time, as stated in the report, I think it makes sense actually. In my preliminary conversations with, I haven't reached out to all, but some of the planning advisory committee members, they were agreeable to the option of joining the committee of adjustments. I wouldn't want to move forward with this if it meant that the remaining members of PAC were not included in the committee of adjustments. I think that's only fair. My concern would be, as written in the report, we are undertaking a whole new official plan and zoning bylaws. So to try and bring a new member in the middle of that process would be quite onerous. And I think it's better that we, for the remainder of this term of council, move the planning advisory committee into the committee of adjustments. So I'm in favor of it.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm in favor of it. Makes sense.
Yeah, it was an excellent report. It had a lot of all the relevant information so that we could actually make a very good informed decision.
Okay. Steve, any question?
Anything from you? You're the deputy chair of it, so. And the mayor, what are your thoughts?
I don't know. I guess I'm a little disappointed that we would no longer have a planning advisory board. And I guess is the fact that it seems like another door closed to the public. And that's my opinion. We used to have committees for the road committee. There's no committee there. There's no longer a committee with the fire department. Now we'll probably close down our planning committee. The only committee we really have that functions is the recreation committee. And you have very good volunteers, and that's why it happens. Without the volunteers, three people couldn't keep
We
it
have a really
going.
good library board. We have a really good library board.
Yes, that's right. But they're not a committee of council neither. The library board has their
Well,
own,
they're appointed by council though. The board members are appointed by.
that's right
council.
too. Yes, that's good. I just am a little disappointed, but if the majority feel that this is the way to go, I'm okay with it.
I think just for the remainder of this term of council, for sure, if any future council can look and say that if they feel that a planning advisory committee is needed, or would be better for public consultation or public engagement, absolutely. I just think that
Yeah, it's 8 months.
we are short-staffed for 8 months, or short a committee member for 8 months, and trying to bring somebody in would almost not be fair to that person at this point, trying to get up to speed with.
The
We've had
official plan's a big
long-
document.
We've had long meetings about the official plan and zoning bylaws, so that would be quite the owner's task, so. I think-
Yeah, I see both sides of it. I see what you're saying. But I'm just expressing my
Yeah.
feeling, that's all.
Yeah, fair enough.
And we have had planning advisory committee for a long forever. And, we also have the public involved in it as well, and I like that part of it. And probably the same thing, then with the library board, you have, members there. And, recreation, I guess. So council wants to transfer to the, committee of adjustments. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, with the remaining PAC members. So I think we have 2 plus you and I, which we already sit on committee of adjustments. So there's 2 that hopefully would be agreeable. I think 1 is for sure agreeable to come and also be a valued member of the committee of adjustment.
So, the next planning meeting, there won't be another planning board meeting or planning advisory board meeting, committee meeting. It will come to the committee of adjustments. Is that what you're saying?
There, in the next step section of the report, there's one more planning advisory committee. And then after that planning advisory committee, again, have a fulsome conversation and then pass the recommendation. Then at the next council meeting, council can pass the bylaw to merge the 2 committees into the committee of adjustment. So essentially nothing from PAC, nothing from the planning advisory committee is lost. It just moves over to the committee of adjustment. The other thing that makes this particular time a little bit unique is that we do have that conflict of interest on the official plan from one of the committee members, from one of the public members. So to bring someone up, there's only 3 people on the PAC committee who are familiar with that very large document. So that's why it would be very hard to bring a 4th person in and get caught up when we hope to adopt it in the next 6 months.
Okay. Can we have a mover and seconder for the report?
Moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor McInnes, that council accepts this report as a review of existing planning committees, including the Planning Advisory Committee and the Committee of Adjustment, and further that council moves forward with the merger of the 2 planning committees for the remaining term of council.
All in favor? Karen? Order. Next, we have a report from the Public Works Manager for overweight permits.
Thank you. So just some background information. Half-load permits are typically issued at the discretion of the Public Works Manager between the dates of March 1st and May 15th. These are based on a number of factors such as the route taken, the time of day it will be traveled, and conditions of specific roadways. The hauling companies are permitted to drive trucks with a half load unless they obtain an overweight permit. These permits, if allowed, would allow for the contractors to haul a full load of material on Bonfield roads. The permit cost currently associated with this is $125 per vehicle. And in 2025, the township issued 10 overweight permits, totaling $1,250. During the 2025 half-load season, which is March 1st to May 15th, the township received 10 overweight permit applications with fees totaling $1,250. With their 2025 gravel stockpile material costs totaling $17.98 per ton as RFQ 2025-02, the permit revenue being $1,250 would allow for approximately 70 tons of material to be applied to fix the road damages caused by overweight loads. With municipal trucks holding 15 tons per load, it would allow for approximately 5 loads of gravel to be applied and covered by this permit cost. In 2025, the Public Works Department fixed multiple roadway issues on such roads as Farmers Line, Gay Road, Boundary, and Development Road, which were caused by contractors hauling during half-load season. Let it also be noted, most contractors hauling material throughout the municipality did not purchase a permit, meaning that if this program is to stay in place, more enforcement will be necessary. So in closing, it's believed that it's under the best interest of the township that the overweight permit process is removed and contractors are no longer able to haul full loads during the half-load season from March 1st to May 15th. With only 10 permits being approved and issued, it does not cover the extra cost incurred by the municipality to continue fixing road damages caused by overweight loads. It's also recommended that the Public Works Department reach out to the MTO to further enforce these half-load rules within the municipal boundaries.
Okay, any questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good thing. The cost of fixing roads are so expensive and they're only gonna increase tenfold with the new fuel prices. So I think it's a good way to protect our roads and our infrastructure.
Okay. When you say this permit is for the contractors, at the end of the day, is it for the taxpayers or the contractors?
It would be essentially the contractor, right? So it's whoever's hauling the material.
So if they were
purchase-
hauling material to a township, an owner in the township?
Correct. So usually what ends up happening from past experience is that contractor will revert that cost to the homeowner on top of the material. So
Yeah,
that
so
100
at the end of the day, the homeowner pays for it, right?
Correct, essentially, yeah. So just a bit of like insight into this. So essentially, the reason this came up in question is because looking at the business model, the money coming in from the permits did not match the money going out to fix the required.
So
road.
not everybody was purchasing it, what you
Correct,
said.
yes.
I was thinking of another question. So, the people on the roads now, you say it's the MTO that'll monitor it?
Well, the
Is it-
MTO is the one that would enforce. I know OPP has the ability now, as they're designated through the MTO, to weigh vehicles. Like they have roadside scales. But essentially it would be the Ministry of Transportation that would be enforcing.
So anybody out there between, May 1st, March 1st and May 15th would have, now would have only a half load. Is that
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Okay. Can we have a mover and seconder?
Moved by Counselor McInnes, seconded by Counselor Corbett, that council for the Township of Bonnfield hereby cease the practice of issuing overweight permits during the annual half-load period effective for 2026.
All in favor? Carrie? Where are we on now? Next? Okay, adoption of committee minutes. Planning Advisory Committee,
No motions.
no motion. Just corporate services. Mover and a seconder.
Moved by Counselor Clark, seconded by Counselor McInnes, whereas the Corporate Services Committee recommends to council to add the Retta Glen Park and the Kabiscon Park recreation improvements as described in the report to the list of priorities, and that staff be directed to apply for eligible funding programs as they become available. Be it hereby resolved that council approves of this recommendation.
All in favor? Carried. We have another motion for the Integrity Commissioner. Mover and a seconder.
Moved by Counselor McInnes, seconded by Counselor Clark, whereas the Corporate Services Committee recommends to council to authorize staff to issue a request for proposal for an integrity commissioner to ensure value of service, be it hereby resolved that council approves of this recommendation.
All in favor? Carried. Next, we have another one. With respect to the letter to the Animal Health Network. Mover and a seconder, please.
Moved by Counselor McInnes, seconded by Counselor Featherstone, whereas the Corporate Services Committee recommends to council to support the letter of the Northern Producer Animal Health Network to the Ministry of Northern Economic Development and Growth and the Minister of Agriculture regarding the urgent concern on the removal of the NPAHN and veterinary service committees that serve our community, be it hereby resolved that council approves of this recommendation.
All in favor? Carried. And then items for discussion. It's the application for aggregate license amendment. 1851477 Ontario Inc.
So I have actually heard from a constituent who is a neighbor to that quarry who has significant concerns about the traffic, has already reached out with regards to traffic enforcement and speed and road damage that's happening from the existing traffic that's happening there. So obviously redirected to the OPP for any enforcement. But you know, I think it's important that we understand that the constituents in that area are also, or some are feeling concerned about the traffic flow and heavy traffic and the speed and the danger that they feel their family is in based off of the speed the trucks are going down that road. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's been a pit for,
yeah, this is doubling it, is essentially like it's gonna double the number of loads coming out of there. So that's obviously where the concern is coming from.
yeah, I mean, as far as damage on the roads, these pits do pay back to the municipality to repair the roads that they are hauling on, so.
Yeah, it was from the perspective of what that damage did to the cars prior to us being able to get there. And so I'm not,
No, I'm,
like, I understand that it's a pit and a quarry now, and I think it's just the doubling of the number of trucks that are gonna be on that road hauling, I think was the concern.
yeah, I mean, you have a pit that's 20,000 ton right beside it. I mean, you got those trucks regardless. I mean, they've taken that one pit, split it in half, so they're both 10,000 tons. I mean, now he's asking to go put it back to a 20,000 ton pit, which it should, I mean, that's what a B class license pit is.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's not even really up to us. It's up to the up to the province to allow it or not. I think obviously this constituent will write in their concerns because they received a letter from the business. If the municipality is deciding to put a letter in, I think it would be prudent to say that we have heard from constituents in the area or a constituent in the area at this point with that concern. But you know, there's only so far that we can push that. Again, it's not our decision.
So what you're speaking about is someone spoke to you about someone getting this permit?
Correct, because I think the neighboring municipality or property owners received a letter.
Oh, because they would have to probably put a letter out saying.
They did, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why the concern came forward.
Okay, so council has can't object to it, right?
Well,
what you're saying?
Yeah, we can, we can object to it. Council can choose to do what it wants, but it's not ultimately our decision. It's the province that makes that decision.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're just one of the groups, much like a homeowner, that would get asked for our opinion or comment. So,
So the objection here was to this, right? That,
yeah, that was the objection from the homeowner.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying, again, you want more homes in the municipality. I mean, we need gravel pits to support the more homes.
you can't have one without the other.
Right, so, I mean, I get the concern about traffic, and that's police or MTO enforcement, it's not really the gravel pit's fault. I mean, it's up to the police to go and enforce it.
Well, yeah, the vehicles are going too fast and there's that sort of thing, but mover and a seconder.
Moved by Counselor McInnes, seconded by Counselor Clark, that council accepts the application for aggregate license amendment 1851477 Ontario Inc., and that council has no objection.
All in favor?
Yeah, that's fine. I would just ask that if this does pick up and there is more people reaching out to the municipality, that we would also just objectively send in the comments that we've received from constituents as well. I think that's,
Right. Yep.
that's a fair thing for the municipality to do, to ensure that their voices are being heard through their municipal representatives as well.
Well, if the trucks are speeding and that sort of thing on the roads, I think that's what probably we pay 400,000 for OPP, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah.
They could make a trip to Bonfield.
Yeah.
All right, we've covered that one. So next we have resignation of Gina Langua from Planning Advisory Committee. So we need a mover and a seconder.
Are you okay if I make comment before it's called upon? I just, a word of thanks for Gina.
Or if you want to give it after we call for it.
Do you
Get a
want?
mover and seconder. then-
Yeah, I think there's a mover. Oh, I'm
We
sorry. You haven't
already
read it yet?
moved it and seconded it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I saw the hands go up. Go ahead. Sorry.
Moved by Counselor Featherstone, seconded by Counselor McInnes, that council hereby accepts Gina Longua's resignation from the Planning Advisory Committee.
Okay,
Just as the chair of planning advisory committee, obviously, I would just like to say it's accepted with regret. It's unfortunate that Ms. Langua has resigned. She brought a voice of professionalism and a strong advocate for the community. So we wish her well, and thank you for her service to the municipality. So
Yeah, I mean,
you don't have anything to say? I agree with Jason that we accept Gina's resignation from our Planning Advisory Committee. I guess because I think a lot of that committee, and over the years there's been lots of severances and lots of buildings and whatever. And Gina was a very knowledgeable person because that was what her career was based on, land in, I think, with the ministry. So we'll miss her and we'll accept her resignation with regret, like Jason said. All in favor? Carried. Next, we have correspondence. Urgent action on Highway 17, one. And you're going to tell Andre if you want to support that?
yeah, we should support that.
yeah.
Okay. Ministry of Natural Resources Inspection 26-27, annual work schedule for the Nipissing Forest and Algonquin Forest and Algonquin Park. And that's information only.
Yes.
And Rideau Lake Township concerns Alto high speed rail project, Bill C 15 budget. That's in for? Or, okay. City of Sarnia, Mayor Authority and Municipal Police Budget Sustainability. That's for support, is it? I can't remember.
It could be, I'm fine.
If it's for
yeah,
support, I would support it.
Sure.
And then we have the special meeting from the library board. Donna, do you have anything you want to talk about on it?
It's just concerning some staff turnover. That was
Okay.
really all it was. Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah.
City of Ottawa, proposed new regulations under the restricting public consumption of illegal substances act.
I'll support that.
Hmm?
I will support that. I'll support that.
Support. And revisions to the Conservation Authority boundaries.
That's
I think that's just information.
Yeah.
So we need a motion to accept the correspondence. Mover and a seconder.
Moved by Counselor Corbett, seconded by Counselor McInnes, that council receives a correspondence circulated with the agenda of March 24th, 2026, and further that council supports the following items, A, D, and F, and further that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the appropriate ministries, the originator of the proposal, and MPP Vic Fideli and/or MP Pauline Rochford.
All in favor? Carried. No closed session, we had that. Confirmatory bylaw. Mover and a seconder.
Moved by Counselor Corbett, seconded by Counselor Clark, that the council for the Township of Bonfield hereby adopts bylaw 2026-18 to confirm the proceedings of council from March 10th, 2026 to March 24th, 2026, as presented and is considered read 3 times and passed this 24th day of March, 2026.
All in favor? Carried. Next, the adjournment.
I think we all
Mover
want
and
to
a
stand.
seconder. You don't want to close
No,
it?
we want to stand.
Oh, maybe we could bring
Does the
impact.
staff want to stay longer?
No thanks.
No comment.
Moved by Counselor Clark, seconded by Counselor McInnes, that this meeting be adjourned at 8:32 p.m.
All in favor? Carried. Good evening and thanks for attending our meeting this evening. It was very interesting with impact.